Thank you for joining me for our application process and tips session. My name is Christy Heaton, and I am one of the admissions officers here at Kellogg. I've worked at Kellogg for 9 years, but not 9 consecutive years. After undergrad, I spent 4 years in admissions with the MBA and full-time programs. During this time, I also met my husband, who was in the full-time program. And no, I did not admit him. So I had the opportunity to get to know Kellogg as an employee, but also as a JV, which is what we call spouses, partners, and significant others here at Kellogg. So I had the chance to experience Kellogg in a whole different way, and this truly furthered my passion for this incredible institution. It also meant a lot of moves were in my future. We left Evanston after we graduated and moved to Cleveland, Ohio, where I joined Progressive Insurance and worked as an MBA recruiter there. We then moved to London, and I worked in student affairs at the Booth EMBA campus there. 5 years ago, we moved back to Chicago, and I rejoined the Kellogg admissions team, and we're now a family of 4. So that's me in a nutshell. But now let's talk about what you really want to learn today, which is the Kellogg application. In this session, we will cover the different components of the Kellogg application, the areas of evaluation, and then some tips to strengthen your application. So let's get started by talking through the application itself. I'm going to spend a bit of time addressing all the components listed on the screen, and I'll share a bit of information on what we are looking for and address a lot of the common questions we get around these topics as well. If you've already started a Kellogg application, this screenshot should hopefully look quite familiar. For talking through the application, I am putting the first several sections of the application together under the category of personal information. After entering your program of interest, and a side note here, you can only select one program, and that's the only program you're considered for. After you enter that personal information and biographical information in the first 2 sections, you will then start working on sharing your employment history. Here, you're asked to enter your professional full-time post-collegiate work history and career goals. I know when I've completed job applications in the past, this part of the process can feel a little bit more tedious and like a grind sometimes. I always thought, you have my resume, why do you need all of this again? But being on this side, let me assure you that we read all of the information in this section. And what you put here, it really helps us get to know you in a different and better way than what is commonly shared in a resume. In this screenshot, I used my own work history as an example to answer some common questions, not to show you how ancient I am. We often hear from applicants that they're concerned if they have a gap in their employment history because of a reorganization, or they took off some time to make a career change, or a big life circumstance, or they're concerned perhaps that they have too much or too little work experience. We in admissions are completely understanding of all these types of things, but you have to tell us. So for my example here, I would want to make sure I took some time to address in the additional information session why I'm applying with more work experience than your traditional applicant, and also why I have gaps in my resume. My husband's relocation, a baby, relocation, a baby. I think you get the point. Chances are, if you have a concern, hesitation, or question about something in your application, we, your reader, do too. So take the time to address it up front and explain. Another common question we receive is, what if I have worked for the same company for my whole career? Should I add it just once? I would say that's up to you. Some candidates will enter one company, and others will enter a new item for each role they've held within that time period at that same company. As an application reader, I will tell you that it is sometimes really helpful when an applicant lists out different roles within the same organization, because new information can be shared, and it can show promotion and growth in a different way than your resume can. You're entering title, description of duties, industry, functional area, and a reason for leaving, whether that's a promotion, to gain new skills, or a rotation program, every time you add a new employer or position. And that's truly helpful information for us. So if you've stayed at the same company but held different roles or functional areas at this time, it really helps to share that with us. If you've gotten more direct reports with each role, you can also spell that out quite clearly here. Another tip for you, use that description of duties box to really boil down and summarize that specific role. Don't just copy a bullet point from your resume. Think about what you would say to somebody if you were in an elevator and had 2 sentences to describe your job. Put that information here. Okay, after you do that, you will be asked to upload your resume and discuss your career goals as a part of the application. With the resume, we're commonly asked if there's a page limit and what sort of format to follow. There's not a page limit, but we do feel 1 to 2 pages is probably sufficient, and there's no specific format you need to follow. However, my advice with your resume is to keep it simple. If you have a technical resume that you use for applying to jobs, that's great. You probably need it for that. But for applying to business school, you really want to take a look at your bullet points and make sure they are still going to be relevant to an audience who is not as intimately familiar with what you are doing on a daily basis. Your resume will be used by the admissions committee and your interviewer, so you want to make sure it will make sense to people who may not know the inner workings of your job. A few other tips or ideas or suggestions without giving you too much direction on what you should specifically put on your resume. I would encourage you to think about what is really important to share. If you graduated college 6 years ago, should high school still be on your resume? Probably not. And one more tip. For those of you coming from an entrepreneurial venture or startup, or if you own your own business, sometimes it's really helpful for us as a reader if you include some additional information about that business in the additional information essay, so that the admissions committee has a really clear understanding of what your business does. The next part under employment is talking about career goals. In this section, please try to do more than a copy and paste of bullets from your resume, especially for the most significant accomplishment. Sometimes that may be on your resume, but try to reword it so it makes sense as a standalone thought. We really do read all the information you put in here and in your resume, and those applicants who have spent a lot of time doing self-reflection and thinking through why they want the MBA and what they want to do with it really knock this out of the park because they have a clear answer that's boiled down to the 150 characters. Also, I would suggest re-looking at this section after you have completed your essays and the rest of your application to make sure it still clearly aligns with all you have said. Sometimes, after more soul-searching through writing the application and talking to more people, these goals can shift a bit, and if you forget to go back and make sure they align, your reader can be left confused. Kellogg accepts both the GMAT and the GRE. Applicants have asked in the past whether we favor one test versus the other, and the answer is no. Ultimately, what we are looking for is a balanced score set. We take your highest score, and if you have taken the test multiple times, make sure you report all of them. It shows effort and initiative on your part if you took it multiple times, and it helps us get to know you better. If you took the test 4 times and got the same score every time, we can see that you tried to improve, and that shows us something about you. If you took it twice and your first score was better, and even if you took it twice and your score was better the second time, we still like to see that you took the time and effort to take it a second time. As an international student, if you completed your degree at an institution where English was not the primary language, we do require an English proficiency exam. You will also need to submit transcripts as a part of the application. An unofficial or electronic version of those transcripts is just fine at this point. You'll need to submit the official version upon admittance to the university. The written essays are your opportunity to talk directly to the admissions committee and to tell your story. We really encourage you to think about the information you are sharing in your 2 essays combined and make sure they share a balanced view of you as an applicant. For both essays, we say 450 words, and that's a guideline. If you have a few less, don't worry about finding another sentence or 2 to get to 450. And if you're over by a few words, we don't want you spending an hour trying to find a way to cut out 2 or 3 words. It's not going to cut you off right at 450, so just use your judgment. The first question we ask is a leadership-focused question, and you can draw upon a professional or community experience for this. I would also suggest you try to use more recent examples. I don't want to tell you what example you should be picking from and what time in your life, but keeping the examples more recent is helpful. If you graduated college 6 years ago, you probably don't want to use an example from high school or your freshman year. The second question is focused on growth. Here you can draw upon a personal or a professional or blend the 2. No 2 applicants do the same thing, and we see it done successfully in all those different ways. So do what feels right and best for you. A few more tips on the essays. For both of these, I suggest applicants read the questions and then brainstorm all the ideas and examples they could talk to in order to answer the question. Then walk away for a few days and come back with fresh eyes and cross off a few examples. Keep doing that until you feel you have the best example or story to share. Also, try not to use that same story for both essays. You want to let us get to know you and new things about you, so utilize this space to share different stories. Have someone who doesn't know you well review your resume and your essays. Can they understand your resume well? What did they get out of your essays? Was it the story or takeaway that you were trying to relay? Did they understand not knowing you? Sometimes when you have people who know you well do the reading, they're adding in context from not knowing you and the story. And when you have someone who doesn't know your specific work experience or the details of that specific story well, they may pick up on things in a way more similar to the person who will ultimately read your essays. Lastly, remember you have space in the video essay as well to talk through some more specifics about Kellogg if you don't get to it in your written essay. We ask all applicants to submit 2 letters of recommendation. One of these letters must come from a current supervisor, and the other can be from whoever you think will speak highly of you either academically or professionally. A tip here, the admissions committee is most interested in someone who knows you and your work experience regardless of title or prior connection to Kellogg. Allow me to elaborate a bit. If you work closely with a Kellogg alum who wants to support you, that's great. We'd love to hear from them. But don't pick them at the expense of someone with whom you work more closely. Pick the best people regardless of title or affiliation. A supervisor who understands your daily contributions will likely be much more helpful to us than a CEO who's less familiar with your work. I think it's a good idea to help your recommender understand why you're interested in pursuing an MBA, what your career goals are, and why Kellogg is a good fit for you. But a note of caution here. Meeting with them and making sure they understand your goals is terrific. Writing any part of the recommendation is not. Make sure you pick people who will take the time to do you justice. Someone who asks you to write any part of your recommendation letter is not your best choice. We also know some applicants aren't able to approach a current supervisor for a recommendation. Previous supervisors, clients, or project managers may be good alternatives. If you don't choose a current supervisor, just let us know why. It would affect my bonus or that promotion I'm up for. I'd be asked to leave. I've only worked for my current manager for 3 months. Most applicants who don't have a current supervisor write their recommendation, provide an explanation in that additional information section of the application. At Kellogg, we seek to interview as many applicants as possible. As part of your application, you are required to request either an on-campus or off-campus interview. All of our interviews are evaluated and weighed the same, whether it's on campus with an admissions officer or current student, or off campus with an alum. Pick the format that is most convenient for you. If you do select an on-campus interview, you will see a link appear on your applicant status page after submitting the application. You'll click this link and schedule your interview at a date and time that works best for you and your schedule. A tip here, the earlier you submit your application, the more choice in date and time you will have. Interviews are scheduled on a first-come, first-served basis, so keep this in mind. If you select an alumni interview, you will hear from our office within 4 to 6 weeks with an update on your alumni interview request. All interviews are behavioral-based and based only on your resume, and the person who interviews you will never go on to read your application. All right, let's talk about that video essay. I don't want you to panic or stress or run away. The video essay allows the entire admissions team to meet all of our applicants, wherever they are in the world, and gives us a chance to meet you beyond the pages of your application. It also enables us to assess the communication skills of our potential applicants through a medium that has quickly become an integral part of the business communications landscape. You will be asked to complete the video essay after submitting your application, and I encourage you to go to our website and read the FAQs as they will prepare you well for the process. And we even give you one of those questions in advance. After watching a lot of video essays, let me give some further advice here. Please, please, please be yourself and don't be scripted. If you're scripted, you're sort of missing the point. Listen, I get this can feel awkward. I'm doing a version of this right now. Trying to talk to you through a camera is certainly not the most natural thing. I prepared my remarks for this webinar and I thought about what I was going to say, but I'm not reading from a teleprompter or an iPad strategically placed by the camera telling me what to say. I've probably made a few grammatical mistakes today and not been perfect, but on the whole, I hope I'm doing okay and letting you all get a feel like you get to know me a little bit better and also learn the information I'm trying to share. Another tip, you have up to a minute to give your answer, but if you're done within 40 seconds, feel free to hit that stop button. You don't need to keep talking and talking and talking to fill that space. If you gave your answer and it took 40 seconds, great. Be done and move on. On the flip side, if your answer goes over the 1-minute mark and you get cut off, don't worry. This isn't going to negatively impact your application, and we're just going to be left with a great cliffhanger. Do the practice questions. It's going to make you get the camera and microphone set up and will get you familiar with the technology as well. All right, let's talk about those questions now. The first question is an icebreaker question. You shouldn't need to look at notes to think about what you're going to say. Have fun with it. The questions are easy. If you go anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would you go? Don't tell us you would come to Evanston. We know you're applying to us. We know everything you've written in your application, and we don't ask you these icebreaker questions in the application. So relax and just be yourself. The second question, we give it to you ahead of time so you can think about it and some things you would like to say, but please don't write a script, memorize, or recite and read it to us off the screen. Please take notes. Think about what you want to say, and then just say it. We want to see you talk like you would in an interview, and reading a script makes you sound robotic. All right, the third question. This will be more of an interview type question, but still not something to worry about, and it's around the theme of a challenging situation. So for this, think of a bunch of examples you could use, prepare like you would for an interview, and then give your answer. Okay, so read the FAQ, practice, and be yourself. Okay. I'm going to give a few examples, and these are only examples. This is not a template of what you need to do or shouldn't do to make a good video essay. We've seen everything over the past few years, and these stories are meant to help show it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need a recording studio to do this, and you just need to be yourself. Also, I want to preface this by letting you know all of these examples are of current students or recent graduates, and I have their permission to share these examples with you. Okay, so this video essay starts. He's doing a great job. In the background, you notice a few stuffed animals in the corner. So in my mind, as I'm watching this, I'm thinking he's in a kid's room while he's talking. And midway through his first video essay, you see the door in the background open, and then you see his son walk in and approach the computer where his dad is in the middle of the Kellogg video essay. It was priceless. This candidate took it in stride. He paused, introduced his son, and then dove back into his answer while his son held up toys and snacks for us to see. It was hilarious. And I'm sure, well, actually I know because the candidate told me that he was terrified. He thought this was going to have a terrible impact on his application. It absolutely did not. We were amazed he could talk through it. He was himself, he still gave his answer, and while it probably wasn't the perfect answer he had in mind, it worked. Okay, this is an example of an overall great video essay. The applicant introduced herself and where she was from when she started her first response, and I could tell it immediately set her at ease and gave her a good starting point. In her first essay response, she talked about an Uber driver she had met and found his story to be really interesting. Her second two responses shared helpful and relevant information that was not in her application, and even though she was cut off in both of her responses, it didn't make a difference. We still got the information and got to know her. When I emailed her asking if I could use this as an example, she told me she was really nervous before and after since she was cut off mid-sentence. But she did find the practice questions to be extremely helpful in learning how to manage time, look directly in the camera, check her lighting and sound. Okay, one more example. This applicant gave great responses in her first two questions. She came across as poised and professional. She shared great information. And in her third response, she fell off her chair. Seriously, a few seconds into her third response, she lost her balance and fell out of sight. She pulled herself back up and kept on going. She said she's laughing about it now, but was terrified of what that moment did to her application. And I feel terribly knowing she probably felt awful after this happened. All the hard work and effort she put into her Kellogg application, and she fell off her chair. I had a laugh, and I was impressed that she could continue on delivering her answer. So my hope is that by sharing these examples, you can see that people are human. Not every video is perfect, that even when you prepare, you can fall off your chair or run out of time or have a child walk in on your answer. The important thing is that you do the practice questions. Get yourself into an environment where you won't be interrupted, that has good lighting, nothing distracting behind you, and that the sound works, and then just go for it and be yourself. All right, the last thing you need to do in this section is to review your application, check for errors and typos, and then hit submit. All right, I think I've exhausted the application components, so now let's move on to looking at how we evaluate the candidates. At Kellogg, we have a holistic review process. All parts are looked at and evaluated equally. There's no percentage or a weight assigned to a specific category. It's truly about getting to know you in all of those different attributes and your story specifically. So in no particular order, I'm going to talk through the different areas we are looking at when evaluating an application. For intellectual ability, here we are really looking for indicators of potential success in the classroom. We want to make sure that everyone coming to Kellogg can handle the rigor of the classwork and is set up for success. This comes through in several areas of the application, and to evaluate each candidate, we're looking at your GMAT or GRE scores, and no, we don't have that preference for one over the other. We're hoping to see a balanced subset of those scores. We take a look at your transcripts, the classes you took, the grades you received, the problem solving and critical thinking skills, which typically come through in your interview and your letters of recommendation. Next, we take a look at your work experience. Here, we're looking for the quality of an individual's experience, since everyone's background is unique and different. We want to know what you have done and accomplished in your career and how this compares to your peers. We look for promotions, continued career progression, taking on bigger and more complicated projects over the timeline of your career, and a good track record of success. We are also looking at your experience leading teams or projects. Next, we take a look at your professional goals. We feel it is very important to understand your particular story, where you have been, why you need the MBA, and where you are hoping it will take you. Getting the MBA is not about checking a box. We want to know why the degree is the right one and why Kellogg is the right place for you. Part of this is also talking about what it is you want to do after business school and making sure that that next step makes sense and is attainable for you. We take a look at your leadership. This is also something that's different for every applicant we have here at Kellogg. We see leadership come in a lot of different forms. It can mean managing a team, managing your peers, leading a large-scale project, taking a leadership role in a community activity. We want to hear about a time when you took a leadership position and what you learned. While we want to hear about demonstrated leadership experiences, we're also looking for potential leadership because we understand that most of our applicants are still building out this skill set. So if you are someone who's still early on in their leadership experience, are you someone who has a desire to further cultivate these skills while at Kellogg? We hope so. All right, we take a look at the impact that you're making. Here, what we're trying to understand is to get to know you beyond your work experience and the bullets on your resume. Who are you outside of work? What are your hobbies, passions, interests? Where do you see yourself contributing at Kellogg? Interpersonal skills. Here, we're not trying to assess whether you are an introvert or an extrovert. We have both here. Our community values collaboration, involvement, and giving back. And we want to make sure that we're selecting people who will thrive in this type of environment. Our students like to hear different viewpoints. They respect others, can voice and challenge opinions, and aren't afraid to speak up, but they do so in a way that's collaborative and helps further group and classroom conversation. And these are the types of things that we're really looking for in our applicants. Okay, so we've talked through the application, the evaluation piece, and hopefully addressed a lot of those commonly asked questions along the way. But now I want to share some other tips for strengthening your application. Okay, the first is to submit when you're ready. We have a lot of applicants who are pushing to apply in round 1, and life happens, and either the option is push yourself to hit submit in round 1 or think about delaying for round 2 or round 3. I would encourage you to think about delaying instead of submitting a rushed application. We want to see your best foot forward, so put together the most complete and thorough application you can and submit in the round that best fits that. Also, if you and your JV are both pursuing your MBA, we would really encourage you to apply in the same round. This just makes it easier for both of you to have the opportunity to make your decision with all the information as possible. Also, make sure you let us know that you're applying together. Okay, do your research. What I mean by this is learn about what Kellogg has to offer, but specifically to you. Which program is the best fit for you? What clubs are you interested in? Talk to students, talk to alums, research your career goals, talk to people in those roles you think you want to be in, and educate yourself really well before you sit down to write your application and hit submit. I would encourage you to tell your story, where you've been, what you're doing now, and where you want to go, and to use the whole application to tell that story. Each part can tell us something different. Be thoughtful about those examples you're choosing, and try really hard not to use that same example over and over and over again. Be yourself. Don't tell us what you think we want to hear. Tell us what makes you you. Also, we want you to think beyond that application submission. I think this is one that a lot of people miss. How are you going to get ready for the program? Are there skill gaps that you want to address before you start? How are you going to finance your degree? Is there more work you can do on your career next steps before you begin the program? On the screen here, you can see the application dates for this year. We have one submission date and one decision release date for each round. I like to say the best time to apply is in round 1. All the seats are open and available. By round 2, it's our biggest and largest round, and some of the seats have already been taken, so it's a little bit more difficult. And by round 3, almost all the seats have been taken, and this is certainly the smallest and most difficult round to be applying. I hope that this session was useful to you and answered a lot of the questions that you were hoping to have covered. If for any reason I didn't get to the question that you were hoping I would, please feel free to reach out to us at the email address or phone number listed on the screen. We look forward to you submitting your application and reviewing it in the future.